Hello there, today I am here to bring you the first half of my February reading. It's not been the best first half of the month, but I've kind of been focusing on other things as well as reading, so I'm okay with that. And I have still got 3 books done, which I will go straight into now. So the first one of these was Vanessa Bohemians by Emma McBride. This is her second book, her first one being A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing, which, if you've been around for a while, you will know was one of my favourite books of the year 2 years ago, and it recently made it into my favourite list since starting BookTube. It's an amazing book. Sadly, this one let me down a little bit, so it's still an okay book. It's still got Emma McBride's style in there, which is very poetic. It's staccato. It's kind of poetry in a book, basically. It's not full sentences. It's kind of very stream consciousness and very unique, and I really like that style, and that's what I loved about A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing. It's a style that when you first start reading it, you're not entirely sure that you understand what's going on, but as you get into a pace of reading it, you just start to understand, and I think that's so effectively done. Basically, a book which follows an 18-year-old actress from Ireland, and she moves to London to study, and she ends up getting involved with an older kind of well-known actor, and it looks at basically their relationship and the impact that they have on each other's lives. The thing that I think let me down for this book is that the best way I can describe it is that it's kind of 50 Shades of Grey if 50 Shades of Grey was well written and literary. So in that sense, that's fine. I don't mind sex in a book, but this book is very much sex scene, fallout, sex scene, fallout. It becomes quite formulaic by the time you're about halfway through. It's kind of, you're losing that momentum. You know, for the first quarter I was thinking absolutely this is going to be a 5-star again, loving it, and then it just kind of the same thing happens again and again and again. And you know, when you're at like the 6th or 7th sex scene in that quarter of the book, you just start thinking, really, I felt like it needed more. And also, one of my main problems with this is that it very much reads like a second book, which is confusing for me because Emma McBride says that she took 10 years to write this, but it reads like a book which has been rushed to meet a second book deadline, because there are sections in the middle and the ending of this which are literally just about 50 pages of exposition. It's just this older actor telling his life story, and the problem that I had with those sections is that when he is telling people his life story, he is not using Emma McBride's style, obviously, because it is speech, and so you lose that stylistic element which I think is so strong in her books. Would I say that this is a terrible book? No, it's still got, you know, it's still got its strong points, and the actual narration from the girl is really strong still, and I really enjoyed that. But the just massive info dumps, honestly, just completely destroyed it for me. I really don't understand how that got past editing, and I just don't understand. So it really disappointed me. I really got the feeling that Emma McBride, A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing was her book. It was the book that she was meant to write. It was the book that was close to her heart. This kind of feels like an afterthought. I'm really sorry, I feel so harsh saying that, but yeah, it just didn't live up to A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing at all. I would still absolutely pick up anything else Emma McBride wrote, but ultimately I just didn't get along with this one, sadly. Then I have a reread, which is Michelle Faber's The Book of Strange New Things. Now this I didn't love when I read it last time. I think I gave it 3 stars, but since then Michelle Faber has become one of my favourite authors thanks to The Crimson Petal and the White. I also read Under the Skin by him and quite enjoyed it last year, and also read his poetry collection Undying, and found out just a bit more of his backstory about his wife, and also his backstory about when he was writing this book. So this is, I think he's effectively said that this is going to be his last book, and it is a book that he wrote while his wife was dying, and he sort of wrote it in homage to her, and he wanted her to read it before she passed, which I think completely changes the context of this book, so I wanted to reread it with that in mind. It's still not my favourite, but I'll go on to talk about that later. So the interesting thing with Michelle Faber is that he's got 3 sort of long fiction books out, and every single one of them is entirely different from the other. I think he's probably the author that I would pinpoint to say that he has no set style. I think he enjoys completely changing between books, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because I think it's nice to have that refreshing approach to a book, but also I think it probably makes it difficult for him to be an author that you just blanket love all of his stuff, because it is all so different. This book follows a man called Peter. He's a reverend, and he has been commissioned to go on a missionary journey into space, to talk to aliens, an alien race, about God, basically. And the body of the book focuses not necessarily on his mission itself, but on the way that his journey and the distance between him and his wife impacts their relationship, and the way they understand each other and the way they communicate. And I think the reason that I wanted to reread this with Michel Faber's personal story in mind is because I think that adds a whole new prevalence to it, knowing that he was writing this to his wife who was dying of cancer, and suddenly this book becomes a metaphor for the fact that this illness was creating this massive distance and this massive alteration in their experiences, I suppose. And I think definitely, as I say, knowing that is the backstory to this book definitely changes my reading of it, because I think when I reviewed it before, I said that I kind of wanted more of the mission stuff and less of the Peter and his wife stuff, but I totally get that now. And I don't think that the focus is in the wrong place anymore anyway, rereading it, because it is kind of about the idea that our world is ending, and this new world is kind of, Peter's gone off to this new world, and Beatrice, his wife, is trying to message him to tell him about all the awful things that are happening back on our world, and he just can't bring himself to care about it because he's so removed from everything that's happening. I gave it 4 stars this time. I did enjoy it, and I have a real love for this book as a physical object, and also just as a story. It's not the best written story. There are big holes in it, which I will go into. But as a story, I just kind of feel like it's a blanket, and that's why I wanted to reread it as well. Like, it's not the best written thing in the world. It's certainly probably my least favourite Michel Faber. But there's something really comforting about it, and I think the message is really hard-hitting and important. The main issue that I have with this book, though, as I say, is that it is pretty much a book of holes. There are massive holes in here. Small things and big things. For example, a small thing that kept niggling me throughout is the fact that when Peter is first going to meet this alien race, never told exactly how long humans have been on this planet, this new planet, but they've been there for a while, like a good few years. And the girl transferring Peter to the alien race is saying that they've never been able to distinguish between these alien species. They've never known how many there are, or whether they deal with the same one each time, or whether it's always different ones. They have no distinguishing features, no way to know which one is which. But as soon as Peter gets there, he tells us that every single Oasin, which is this alien race, every single one of them different coloured robes. So straight away you're like, really? And there were quite small niggles like that, which are just, they're small things that you would think an editor would pick up on. Again, with editing, I'm just all I hate in the editing at the moment. It's a small thing, but it's one of those things that you really should pick up on, because it bugged me. And then there are bigger things. For instance, at one point, to not spoil anything, Peter finds out about something on Earth. He basically finds out about what's happening and why everything is falling apart, and he tries to send a message to Beatrice to talk about that. And also starting to realise things like the magazines that they're allowed in this new planet have had pages taken out of news stories and things like that, that they don't want these new people to know about, because they don't want them to know what's going on back on Earth. But then Beatrice is continually messaging Peter with messages about what's happening on Earth, and they're never blocked. She's never told that she can't send them. So again, a hole like that is perhaps a small thing in the grand scheme of the book, but I felt like it needed to be ironed out. It's a book that needed to be thought through a little bit more, I feel, and yeah, it just needed probably one more edit to be a fully functional book. But needless to say, as I say, I upped it by 1 star, so I did enjoy it on this reread. The month I read Swamplandia by Karen Russell. I have been dying to get to this ever since reading Vampires in the Lemon Grove 3 years ago now. 2 years ago, which I adored, and this is her first and only novel, I believe. She's also got another short story collection out, which I must get, St. Lucy's Home for Girls Raised by Wolves, I think it's called. So this book is it looks at a family who live on a place called Swamplandia. It's kind of a carnival slash crocodile park, and the mother of the family, Hilola, does this massive act. She's kind of the main draw for tourists to go there. She doesn't act with the crocodiles, and she's supposed to be the best crocodile wrestler in the world, but she dies of cancer, and this basically looks at how that impacts her 3 children and her husband, predominantly following Kiwi, her son, and Ava, one of her daughters, and basically it looks at how her death fragments the family. Obviously, when she's not at the park, they go into debt because they're not attracting the tourists that they were attracting. Kiwi ends up moving to the mainland to try and make money to send back to his family, and then the chief appears, and Ava and Osala, her sister, end up becoming fractured from each other, and it kind of just looks at how this family fragments in the aftermath of the loss of their mother, and also how they work their way back to each other. I really adored this. I gave it 4 stars. I think Karen Russell's writing is beautiful. She just has this real way with words. It's astounding. I think in terms of technicality, she probably overwrites. I think I once copy and pasted a piece of her writing into Hemingway app just to test the waters, and I think it got like a 14, which is really bad. But it's just beautiful. You just can't not love her writing. I suppose it's probably not for everyone. It's quite flowery, it's quite beautiful, it's quite poetic, but I just adore it. That said, this wasn't a perfect book, hence why I only gave it 4 stars. I think the main problem with it is that it very much does read like somebody who is used to writing short stories trying to write a novel, and I don't even know how I can pinpoint why that is, but it just does. I think it's quite slow in places. It kind of drags a little bit, and I don't know that it overly comes together. I think that's natural though, because short stories are such a different form to a novel. I think this is kind of her beginning novel, and I really hope that she writes more, because though there were those small niggles in there, it's a beautiful, beautiful book, and I really loved the concept of the story and also the way it's told. I don't think the actual language used, for instance, is a problem, and it certainly never bored me, and I never wanted to put it down, but it did get slightly draggy. There were points where I felt like I couldn't quite see where the plot was going. Yeah, I feel like it needed a bit more meat to it and a bit more forward momentum, but other than that, it's beautiful. I would recommend it though, as I say, not if you don't like flowery language. Perhaps start with one of Karen Russell's short story collections, and if you enjoy that, I could pretty much recommend that you will enjoy this. But if you don't like that, you probably won't like this. So there you go. Please let me know down below if you have read any of these books, and I will see you next time. Bye!